Hey guys, welcome back. So in this series of video, we are going to talk about upcasting and downcasting in Java. And also we are going to understand why we need upcasting and what is the benefit of using upcasting and what is downcasting and why we need downcasting, okay? So we are going to talk about it step by step. But in this particular tutorial, we are going to talk about upcasting in Java and we're going to write a lot of code which is based on upcasting, okay? So let's get started then. Alright, so now let's create few classes here, okay? So now let me create a class here. Let me say class and let me give a class name here, mobile, okay? So class mobile, I'll open it here and close it here. Let's say in my mobile class, I have a simple method called calling. So I'll write void and calling. I'll open it and close it and I'll give the parenthesis, curly braces here. And let's say that I have a simple print statement here inside this calling method. Let's say calling from, let's say calling only, okay? So there we go. Okay, so I have a class here called mobile, I have a function called calling, and inside the calling method, I'm just printing a statement calling, all right? And now let's say I have another class here, and my class name is Samsung, okay? So my class name is Samsung here, and this Samsung is a mobile, right? This Samsung is a mobile, isn't it? Okay, so this Samsung and this mobile has a easy relationship, right? And this easy relationship is called as inheritance, and to use inheritance I have to use this keyword called extends, right? So class Samsung extends mobile. So mobile is the superclass for Samsung, right? Again, I'll open this class here and let me close it over here, okay? And in my Samsung class, let me override this calling function here. So let me override this. Let's say void calling again, and let me give it a body here, and let me say system.out.println, and let me say calling from Samsung mobile, calling from Samsung, okay? So there you go. And now let's say the Samsung has a new feature in it. If you use the Samsung mobile, you can also use camera, right? Let's say this class Samsung is providing an extra feature, let's say camera, okay? And I'll write system.out.println and let's say camera on. Let's just give a dummy implementation, right? Nothing else. Okay, so there you go. I'm done with it, okay? So I have a class here called Samsung, and the Samsung has a parent class which is mobile. This mobile has one particular function called calling, and this particular Samsung class is overriding this particular function called calling, and it does have an extra feature which is camera. Okay, so now let me represent this entire stuff here diagrammatically, right? So that we can see it better, right? We can experience it better, okay? So let me draw some diagrams here. So let me say this is my mobile, okay? This is my mobile class. Just think like this. It's a class or object, so think like that. So this is my mobile, and inside this mobile I have a function here calling. So let me write over here calling, and I have another class called Samsung, okay? Samsung, and in this Samsung class, this calling feature I'm overriding, and I do have another method called camera. So let me say it has two functions. Let's say calling and camera, right? So there you go. So let's think like this is my inheritance tree: superclass, subclass, mobile, and the subclass is Samsung, right? Okay, so now let's understand upcasting, okay? So we are all set. So what is upcasting? So casting a subtype to a supertype is called upcasting. Casting to supertype is called upcasting. So what I mean by that? Okay, so let me first create a subtype object, okay? So let me create a subclass object over here. So my subclass is Samsung. So let me create the Samsung object. So I'm going to use a different marker here. So let's say Samsung, and I'll say Samsung S equal to new Samsung. Very simple, very straightforward. This is how we create an object, right? So if you talk about this object right now, this S is referencing to Samsung class, right? So this S is subtype reference, isn't it? Because this S belongs to Samsung, this one, and Samsung is a subclass, right? So now I want to cast it to the supertype. Let's say I'm just writing this particular reference here. So as I said, casting something to supertype is called upcasting. Okay, so now this is subtype, and if I'm casting this to the supertype, what is this supertype? Samsung supertype is mobile. So let me write mobile here. There you go. So simple. This is called upcasting. This is what? Subtype. Okay, this is subtype reference. S is subtype reference. Now I'm casting this subtype to supertype. So what is the supertype? Mobile, right? So I'm writing mobile over here. So there you go. So right now this particular thing doesn't have a reference, right? So let's give it a reference. So what I have written over here, this is a mobile type, right? So I have to write mobile here. This is mobile, so I'm writing here mobile, and let me give it a reference, M, and you are done. So this is what we call upcasting. Okay. So if you talk about this thing, this is what you are doing. You are actually doing upcasting here. So if you talk about this particular thing, okay, I can write it in a simple way. So to achieve this thing, you have written two lines of code over here, right? You have written these 2 lines of code here. So let me convert it to a one-liner, okay, and it's very simple. So here what we are doing, we are creating a subclass object, and once the object is getting created here, we are getting the reference, and this reference we are converting to, or we are storing it in a supertype. So first we are creating the object, right? So let me create the object. So how to create the object of this subtype, because I'm creating the subtype object here. So new Samsung, this is what I'm doing here, right? New Samsung, and this is the subtype object, and I am storing it in a supertype reference. So who is my supertype? Mobile, right? So I can write mobile here, and I'll just give it a reference, let's say M. So this is how we are doing upcasting in a one line, right? Mobile M equal to new Samsung. Mobile is supertype and Samsung is subtype. There you go. Simple, right? Alright guys, so now let's have a simple explanation for this. So we have our superclass, we have our subclass. Mobile is our superclass and Samsung is our subclass. So upcasting is casting a subtype to a supertype, right? Casting to supertype is called upcasting. So let's create a subtype object over here. So Samsung is our subclass, so I'm creating a subclass object. So now let's cast it to supertype. So S is subtype, right? So S is subtype reference. Now I'm casting it to supertype. Mobile is my supertype. So I'm casting the subtype to supertype. Now let's give it a reference. So this is mobile, so I have to store this inside a mobile reference. So mobile is supertype, S is subtype. So S is subtype, and I have casted it to mobile, which is supertype, right? So casting a subtype to a supertype is called upcasting, and this is supertype, so I'm storing it inside a supertype reference, right? So basically what I'm doing over here, I'm storing this subtype into a supertype reference, right? This M is holding S right now, and this S is a reference which is pointing to the Samsung class object. Okay, so indirectly we're storing the Samsung class object inside the parent class reference, isn't it? So as we go further in this tutorial, we're going to understand upcasting is safe, upcasting is natural, upcasting is implicit. We don't need to cast it explicitly like this. Okay, it's fine if we're doing it, but as a developer we shouldn't do it because this is implicit. Okay, it can be happen automatically, so as a developer we shouldn't write it to save our time. So let's remove it. So right now I can move this S to here, right? So now this M, which is supertype, is directly holding the subtype reference because this is natural. I don't need to do it explicitly. All right, so now this S is subtype, this M is supertype. my supertype reference is holding the subclass object. So S is a reference here. Now S is pointing to Samsung class object, right? So what I'm doing technically over here, my superclass reference is holding a subclass object, right? So in Java, we can store a subclass object inside a parent class reference. Okay, so now let's make it simple. So here what we're doing, this S is pointing to, so S is a reference, right? And this S reference is pointing to the Samsung class object. So let's create the Samsung class object over here. So new Samsung, it will create the Samsung class object. And now let's store it in a parent class reference. So let's do it over here, mobile M. So mobile M equal to new Samsung. So that's what we are doing it over here. So mobile M, I've written it over here, mobile M. So M is my parent class reference, and inside the parent class reference I'm storing the Samsung class object. So that's what we are doing over here. Inside the parent class reference we are storing the subclass reference. So this reference over here is pointing to this particular object, right? So indirectly we are storing the subclass object here inside the parent class reference. So this is equal to this. So here is the conclusion. As you can see over here and over here as well, we are not casting it explicitly. So upcasting can be done implicitly, upcasting can be happened automatically, and JVM is going to take care of that. Okay, so upcasting is natural, upcasting is safe, and now let's dig into that because we don't need to do upcasting explicitly. Alright, but before we go further, I just want to tell you that in this tutorial I will do some example by doing the casting manually. I mean by doing the upcasting manually, just to make you feel comfortable with upcasting, just to make you feel that what casting actually means, so that you will not be confused and you will get this concept clearly without any confusion. Alright, so now let's go ahead. Right? So either you can go for this or you can go for this, but the result is same. We're doing upcasting here, we're casting it to mobile, and we are doing the same thing. We're creating the object, and once we're creating the object, we're storing it in the reference of a parent type. Okay, mobile is parent type over here. So the subclass object, we're storing it in the super type reference, right? So we are storing this Samsung here in the mobile. We're storing this Samsung in the mobile, right? So we're going like this, isn't it? We're going like this. So we're going up. So let's think like this is your inheritance tree. Okay, so we're going up, right? So we're storing this object in its reference, so we're going up, right? So this is what we called upcasting. Simple, right? So either you can write like this or you can write like this. Okay, so in both the way what you're doing is you are casting a subclass object into a super type. Simple. Casting something to super type, casting something to super type is called upcasting, because you're going upwards in the inheritance tree, right? So that's what upcasting means. Okay, so now let me talk about one of the confusion that a lot of people have. Okay, so just think like I have written two lines of code over here. Okay, so I have a mobile reference and I have a Samsung reference. So how many object has been created if you talk about these two lines of code? Is it one or is it two? And if I'm going to print system.out.println of m, what it is going to give it to me? This Samsung object or mobile object? So now this is a confusion a lot of people have, right? So let's solve this out. So if you talk about here, whenever I write this code, okay, Samsung s equal to new Samsung, obviously a object is getting created in the memory, and this is Samsung object, Samsung class object, okay, Samsung object. So I'm creating the Samsung object, so this s is referencing to this particular object, right? So whenever I'm trying to cast it to mobile, what is happening? So this s object, okay, I'm trying to store it with the parent class reference. So this is a reference, right? This m is a reference. I'm just storing this subtype in a parent class reference. So this is just a reference. This m is right now pointing to this object only, which is the child class object, okay, which is the subtype object here. Okay, it is not creating a different object. This is one object only this S is pointing to this object and this M is also pointing to this object. So think about it. If I do system.out.println of S, what it is going to give it to me? Okay, system.out.println of S. So this S is pointing to what? The Samsung object, right? So it will just give something like Samsung at the rate, class name at the rate, some hexadecimal value, let's say 1, 2, A, B, some hexadecimal code, okay, some hexadecimal number, okay. So again, if I'll do system.out.println of M, then what it is going to give it to me? Okay, so now just see, okay, in the M, what we are storing? The same object here, right? We're storing this S here in M, right? And this M is also pointing to the same object here, right? This child object over here, right? So if you are going to print this M here, it is also going to give you the same reference, okay? So this particular thing you're also going to get if you're going to print the M reference here, okay? Because both M and S is pointing to one object, which is Samsung class object, okay? So you are going to get the Samsung class reference here if you're going to print it, okay? And similarly, if I'm going to print it here, system.out.println of M, so what I'm going to get here, what object you are storing? Samsung object. You are creating a Samsung object and a Samsung class object, and you are storing this object with a parent reference, right? So this object is this particular class object, right? Samsung class object. So you are going to get Samsung at the rate some hexadecimal value, right? Simple, right? So this is one of the confusion a lot of people have, because even I had this confusion when I started learning Java, right? So this is very simple, right? Okay, so now let me do one thing. Let me call all these methods we have, okay, using this reference, okay, and let's see how this is working and what output that we are going to get, okay. So let me wipe these things out. Okay, so let me do upcasting here. So let me do it in a one line. So let me say, what is my parent type? Mobile. All right, mobile, and M equal to, I'll store the child class object here, new. Child class is Samsung, so new Samsung, right? So this is what I'm doing, upcasting here, and I'm storing the Samsung object in the mobile. So I'm storing this in this. I'm going off here. So this is upcasting. So right now, as you already know, if I'll print out this M, what it is going to give it to me? It is going to give it to me this Samsung class reference. So I'm going to get Samsung at the rate some hexadecimal value, and then if I'm doing M dot calling. So if you talk about this mobile, this is M is mobile type reference. This M is parent type reference, right? So if I'm doing calling here, M dot calling, which particular method is going to be get called, right? So see over here, we have a calling method in the super type and we have a calling method in the sub type. So whenever I'm doing M dot calling, compiler is going to check first, okay, is this calling method is over here? Is this calling method is present inside the mobile class? So the calling method is present inside the mobile class, right? This particular method is there inside the mobile class. So this compiles fine. But whenever JVM is going to run this, when JVM is going to execute this particular program, it is going to check. So what JVM is going to check, this M is a mobile type and this M is storing the object of Samsung class. So in the Samsung class, it is going to check whether a calling method, whether the calling method is overridden here in the Samsung class. And in this case, we have overridden this calling method here. Okay. So this particular method is going to be executed because we have overridden it. Okay. So calling from Samsung is going to be the output. We're going to get this particular function executed and we're going to get this particular line in our output, right? Calling from Samsung. So this is what we call dynamic dispatch, right? Calling from Samsung. Okay. Okay, so now let's answer me. If this particular method is not here, okay, suppose let's say this particular method is not here and I'm using, and if I'm doing m.calling, what particular method is going to be get called. Think like this is not here. So I'm doing m.calling. So in the parent class, this calling method is there. Yes, it is there. So if this is there, is it overridden? What this particular m is storing Samsung class object. So in the Samsung class, is it overridden? No, it's not overridden. If it is not overridden, this particular method will be get called. The parent type method will be get called over here. Okay. So right now, if I'm going to do m.camera, okay, if I'm doing m.camera here, now just think what is going to happen. Okay, this is a confusion. Okay, a lot of people get confused about it. Okay, m.camera. So right now, m is of what type? Mobile type, right? First of all, you are going to get a compilation error. Now you might be thinking, why I'm going to get a compilation error? Because you are doing m.camera. So this m is the parent type reference, and in the parent class, in the mobile class, do we have a method called camera? No, we do not have a method called camera here. So you are going to get compilation error over here. Okay, so because this particular method is not available, right? So you might be thinking, okay, so I'm storing the Samsung class object here. I'm storing the Samsung class object here in the m reference. So why not I can access to this particular camera? Okay, this particular camera method. So you have to understand Java is very safe. So Java is going to answer you in this question. Okay, what if you are not going to store Samsung object? I'm safe. I cannot take risk, right? If you want to have it, then you just do downcasting. Okay, so we're going to talk about that later, right? First of all, you have to understand here, if you are using the parent class reference, okay, and if you're storing the child class objective in, you cannot access the child class method. So this m is belongs to the mobile type reference, and in the mobile type reference, we do not have a camera method, so we cannot call this camera method. If you are going to call it, you are going to get compilation error, because Java is safe. Java is going to tell you, what if you are going to store something else here? Okay, how can I be so sure? Okay, so because of the safety, you know, if you are trying to call this particular camera method, then the camera method has to be here in the parent class. Okay, so be sure about it. Okay, so this is what this is how we can call the methods that we have created over here. Okay, so how to call this camera method using the parent class, we're going to talk about it in the next chapter, in the next tutorial, where we're going to talk about downcasting in Java. Okay, so as of now, we are talking pretty much about the upcasting. So now let me do one thing. Let me do all these things that I have created over here in the computer. Okay, so let's go to the computer and let's do all these things practically. All right. Alright guys, so whatever we have done in the tutorial so far, right now we're going to do the practical of it. And also we're going to learn few new things here. And right after this practical session, it will be just for next 5 to 7 minutes. And after that, we'll go through a exercise. Okay, so I'm going to go for a different scenario and you have to guess the output for all the scenarios. Okay, which will make us comfortable in upcasting. Okay, and in that point of view, you have to carefully understand whatever I'm saying over here. Okay, so a few things you have already understood and few things we're going to explore right now. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to create a class here called mobile, and in this mobile class I'm going to have a method called calling, and in this calling method, let's say I have a simple system.out.println and let's say calling here. And right now let me create another class here called Samsung, and the Samsung is a mobile, so it extends mobile. And right now in the Samsung class is overriding this calling method, so let me copy and paste it over here. And right now the Samsung class provides a different implementation for this calling method. Let's say calling from Samsung mobile. Alright, so right now let's use this to particular class over here. Just to experiment, I'm going to create another class called use mobile, and there you go. And here we have a main method, so let me quickly type that in, and let me write here string arguments. So first of all, we're going to do upcasting here, so let me create the object of Samsung class and let me store it with mobile manually. So let's create the object of Samsung class. Samsung s equal to new Samsung. And right now let's cast this object, and here I'm going to cast it to a super type which is mobile, and if this is mobile I need to store it with mobile, and then I'll give it a reference, let's say mob here, and there you go. So right now we got our reference here, so I can call the methods which is available inside the mobile class. Inside the mobile class we have the calling method, so we can call it easily mob.calling. And first of all, let me compile this particular program, and let's say we're getting the expected output or not. Let me zoom this thing and let me do a clear, and there you go. So first of all, let me do a Java.So. My class name is useMobile.Java, and it compiles fine. So there is no error over here, right? So this is the thing to notice. And let me do run it, use mobile, and there you go, calling from Samsung mobile. So we're getting the output as expected, calling from Samsung mobile, because this calling method has been overridden over here. Okay, so that's the thing. It's very simple. And just to make sure, we cannot call the camera method. Okay, so I just forgot to add the camera method here. So let me add the camera method here, void camera inside the Samsung class, and let me do a system.out.println and camera on. Okay, so this camera method is in the Samsung class, so I cannot call the camera method here just because I'm using the parent class reference, right? So if you can see here, this mobile is the parent class reference, right? And inside the parent class we do not have the camera method, we do have only one method. So if I'm going to run this right now, let me run it again, Java.So mobile.java, and I'm getting the compilation error. As you can see, it's just complaining for this. Okay, alright guys, so one more thing that I want to tell you over here, that whenever you do upcasting like this, this is same as this. So you're creating the Samsung class object, so new Samsung, and as we have discussed, we can directly store it in a parent class reference. My parent class is mobile here, so mobile m, right? So this is also going to work fine. So if I'm going to compile here, so let me do a clear screen, and if I'm going to compile here, Java.So use mobile.java, you can say this compiles fine. It's not complaining about it. Okay, so that's another thing to remember here. Okay, so now let's learn some exciting things. Okay, so before we go for this, okay, so now let's learn some new thing. So let's say if I am giving you a number, let's say 10. Okay, so how you are deciding, in which type, in which data type you are going to store it. So by looking at the number you are deciding, right? So you are going to store it in a int or integer, right? So I can write integer I equal to 10, right? So this is perfectly valid. Okay, so how you have decided? By looking at this type, right? And just tell me one thing, you can also store this number in an object, right? Because object is the superclass for every class in Java, and this 10 is of integer type, so I can also store this 10 with a object type, isn't it? Because this object is the superclass of integer class. And similarly, whenever you are doing casting here, so right now let me remove this. So if you see this piece of code and this particular statement here, by looking at this type, you are casting it to mobile. That's why you are writing mobile over here. And also you can store this particular object, the casting super type. In which class you are casting here? Mobile class, right? Who is the super type of mobile class? If you talk about over here, there is no super class for mobile, but as we know, all the classes in Java got the super class, which is object. So I can store this mobile here in mobile because this and this need to be matched. Otherwise, I can store it with an object type, right? That's also fine. Okay, so if I'm going to run this particular program, so Java.So use mobile.java, you can see this compiles fine, right? So Java is not complaining about it, because the thing is, the subtype can be stored inside the superclass reference, and this S is Samsung type and object is the superclass of Samsung, right? I'm casting it to mobile. That means I do have another superclass for this mobile, which is object. Okay, so this class is the subclass for this, and this class is the subclass for the object. Okay, so I can store it over here. Now just tell me one thing. If I'm going to do mobile dot calling, so right now let's just tell me either I'm going to get a compilation error or this particular program is going to work fine. Okay, so let's apply our rule. So I told you this mobile is of object type, and this object, this particular class has been written by the Sun Microsystem people, and those people does not have a method called calling inside our object class. In our object class we do have 11 methods, right? And we do not have any methods said calling, right? We just have created this particular method, and this calling method is available inside the mobile class. So whatever the reference that we have for the parent type, we are only able to call those specific methods. So here the calling method is not available in the object class. So right now if I'm going to compile this particular program again, you can see, okay, let me save this and let me do, just a moment, let me save this again and let me run it, and I'm getting an error here. It's just saying cannot find symbol. This calling method is not there in the mobile type because the mobile is belongs to the object, right? But if I'm going to change it to the mobile type, now it's going to work fine because this calling method is present in the mobile type, okay, because I'm using the mobile reference here. Alright, so that's another thing that you have to remember. Okay, so the another thing, so whatever we learned over here, we can store it either in mobile because this is mobile and this is mobile here, or we can store it with object type, which is the superclass of this mobile. But we cannot try to store it in the subclass variable. Okay, so if I'm trying to store it with some different class variable which is not the superclass of this mobile, at that time we are going to get compilation error saying incompatible type. Okay, so if I'm going to compile this particular program, you can see I'm getting an error. Okay, Samsung mobile. Okay, probably I spelled it wrong. Okay, I put Samsung. Okay, Samsung. I'm sorry. And here if I'm going to run this, yeah, there you go, incompatible types, right? Mobile cannot be converted to Samsung. So because here I'm trying to convert it to mobile, so this should be mobile, but I'm trying to write it over here Samsung, so this mobile cannot be converted to Samsung because this need to be stored in the superclass object, okay, in the superclass reference you can say, okay, and Samsung is the subclass, it's not the superclass of mobile, right? So this and this does not match, and this is not the superclass of this. Alright, okay, one more thing that I want to tell you before we go for our exercise session. I'll just tell you one more thing here. See, here we are casting this S to mobile, right? We are casting this S, which is Samsung class object, to mobile, right? So the reason why we can cast it because of this extends keyword. This Samsung and this mobile does have some relationship, and if they have the relationship, at that time only we can cast. Okay, if this thing does not have any relationship, we cannot cast them. Okay, for an example, right now I'm removing this extends mobile from here, so this is a different class and this became a different class. They do not have any relation. If they do not have any relation, first of all, this particular program is not going to compile because I'm trying to create this Samsung object over here. So S is Samsung type, and I'm trying to cast this S to mobile. So this mobile and this S object or S reference, which is Samsung, they do not have any relationship. Okay, so if they do not have any relationship, you cannot cast it. Okay, you will have compilation error, right? So let me save it, and if I will compile this, you are going to get compilation error saying cannot convert to mobile to Samsung, right? Okay, so these are the few things that I want to tell you before we go for our exercise session. Okay, so right now we'll do some exercise here, and what you need to do, you just need to guess the output. Okay, so let me take you to my whiteboard. We are going to just play around with some code, okay, based on upcasting. Okay, so let's go for it. All right, so let's do some exercise right now. Okay, so now let's do some exercise. Okay, so I hope you already guys have some fundamentals what upcasting is. So let's do something really quick. Okay, I need the answer from you guys. Just guess it with me. Okay, whenever I'm writing some code, you just guess the output. Okay, so just think like I have a class called A. In the A class, I have a method called M1. I have a class called B, which extends to A, and in the B class, I have a method called M2, and I have a class called C. And in the C class, this C class is also extending to the B class, and in the C class I have a method called M3. Okay, so now let's say if I want to store this C class object in the B class, how can I do it? Okay, so I want to store this C object in the B type reference, right? So let's create the C class object first. So let's say C1 equal to new C. Okay, and right now I am just casting the C1 object to a super type, which is B. So I have casted it to the super type. So right now I have to store it in a reference, let's say obj, and this need to same as this. So B, I'm casting it to B, so I'm writing over here B, and I can also store so this and this need to be match. Otherwise this need to be the superclass of this B, right? So I can also write who is the superclass of B. A is the superclass of B. I can write A here, right? So A is the superclass of B, so here it is B. So this need to be same as this, so these two need to be same. Otherwise this need to be the superclass of B. So A is the superclass of B, so I can happily write it. Otherwise above A we have object class, right? Object class is by default the superclass of this particular A, right? So I can also write object here. Okay, so this is also fine, right? Object obj equal to I'm casting C1 to B. Okay, that's also fine. But right now let's go with simple. Let's make it B. Okay, so B and B is matching, right? Okay, so right now I can say obj dot M1. Is it valid or not? Just check it out over here. This obj tends to which particular type? B type. This obj is B type, right? In the B we have M1 method or not? Okay, so right now the M1 method is not over here, but this B class is extending to A class. So by default this M1 method is present over here. So this particular code is valid, right? So obj.M1 we can do it happily, right? So right now can I do obj.M2? Just think and say, right? This M2 is present over here. Obj is what type? It is B type, right? So in the B type M2 method is present over here or not? Yes, it is present over here. Then the M2 method will be get called, no problem. Right now I'll do obj of M3. Okay, so this particular line of code is going to be correct, or it is going to be give it to me a compilation error. Just think like this obj here of what type? This is a B type. In the B type we have M3 method. We have M3 method here? No. If the M3 method is not here, then we are going to get compilation error. We are going to get a compilation error, and this particular code will not be get executed. The reason for this obj is a B type, and in the B we do not have the M3 method. Okay, so you have to understand this, as I said. Okay, so actually we're storing the C1, the subtype, in the super type object, which is B. We're going like this, so this is called upcasting. Okay, so right now let's say I want to store the C class object in the A class reference. So with a one line, how can I write it? I want to store the C class object, so I'll write new C here, and I want to store it in the A class reference. So I'll write A and A, right? This is done. This is what we are doing, upcasting. I'm storing C class object in the A class. I'm in the A type reference, right? I'm storing this C in the A. I'm going up, right? So I'm doing upcasting, right? So can I do A.M1? Okay, so this M1 method is over here. Yes, it is there. Then it is going to work fine. This is going to compile fine. This particular method will be get called. So right now can I do A.M2? Okay, so M2 method is here in the A class. No, it is not there. So this particular code is going to give me compilation error, because this A is of A type and in the A class we do not have a method called m2, so it is going to give me compilation error. Okay, so I can store b in the a, right? So b is the subtype, a is the supertype. Can I write like this? I want to store the b here, and I want to store it with the a class reference. Is it possible? Yes, it's absolutely valid. This is what we are doing, upcasting. I'm storing the b class object in the a class reference. So I'm storing this object in the a class reference. I'm going up. So this is what we're doing, upcasting. So can I do a.m1? A is of what class reference? I mean, what class reference? A class reference. In the a class we have m1 method. Yes, so it is going to valid, right? Can I do a dot hash code? So this hash code method is present where? This hash code method is present in the object class. So all the classes, this a class is by default extending to the object class. So the object class is the superclass of all the classes in Java, right? And in the object class we have a method called hash code, right? So if hash code method is present over here, this method is by default coming to this particular class because this is extending to this. So a.hashcode is going to work or not? Obviously it is going to work. Okay, can I do a.m3? So m3 method is present where? In the C class. So a is what type reference? A type reference. We do not have m3 method over here, so this is going to give you compilation error. Simple, right? Okay, so one last thing. Okay, suppose I want to store this b class reference. Okay, so let me do it manually. Okay, I want to store the b class reference in a super type. So I'm creating the b class object here, b equal to new b. Okay, now I want to cast this b to a super type, let's say a. Okay, so can I write here object O? Is it valid or not? So as I said, this and this need to match. Right now, is it matching? No. This is a, this is object. This is not matching. This is a different class. This is a different class. Okay, so if this is not matching, is this particular class is the superclass of this? A class superclass is what? Object class. So can I write object here? Yes, I can able to write object here. Okay, so can I do O dot m1 here? Now you have to think. Okay, this O belongs to object class. In the object class, have you written this object class? No. So who have written this object class? Sun Microsystem people has written this object class. And inside this object class, do we have a method called do we have a method called m1? No, this m1 is our method, right? We have written it in the A class. So in the object class, we do not have a method called m1 here. So this is going to give me compilation error because this O belongs to object type. Okay, this O is object type. All right, so this is going to give me an compilation error. So the thing you have to remember, this reference, if you are taking the parent class reference, this is limited, right? Whatever the things is there in that particular super type or in that particular parent class, only those method you can call, right? So we have done it in the entire the entire thing that we have done over here. We have just understood this thing, right? Okay, one last thing, okay, before we wrap up this particular session. Okay, so let me remove this piece of code here. Okay, so if let's say I want to store this C class object. Okay, let's say C1 equal to new C. Now I want to cast this C1 object into B type. No problem. So right now right now I'm storing it in the C class reference. Okay, just think, this piece of code is valid or not. So this B and this is C. So this is B and this is C. This two is not matching. If not matching, this C must be the superclass of B. Okay, the C must be the superclass of B. So right now, does C is the superclass of B? No, this is the subclass. So this is invalid, right? Either it need to be B, or it need to be superclass, maybe A, maybe object or something, okay? But I'm writing C here, right? So if you are doing this kind of coding, you are going to get compilation error, okay? Saying incompatible type, right? This B need to be stored in B type or is super type. Otherwise, you'll get incompatible error, incompatible compilation error, okay? And one more thing, which is very important, okay? Let me tell you that also. Okay, just think like if this B is not extending to A, okay? If this B is not extending to A, and right now I told you, okay, just think like I have only two classes here, A and B. Okay, let me remove everything so that you guys will not be confused. Okay, so right now this is a different class and this is a different class. This class is not extending to this class, okay? So can I do this? B1 equal to new B. Okay, this is this class reference. So can I cast this B1 to is let's say A type, and I'm storing A1. So is this a valid piece of code? You have to check. This and this is not there is no relationship, right? This is not extending to this particular class. And if this is the case, if this B1, which is this B class object reference, and this A class does not, this B1 is a B class reference, right? So if this B and A does not have any relationship, this is not going to be compiled at all right? So the compilation is going to be failed. I mean, you are going to get a compilation error saying inconvertible type or something, probably, okay, inconvertible type, right? Just check over here, okay, I'll just write it down over here, okay? So just make sure that this thing is not going to be compiled, because this and this need to be in a relationship if we are casting them, okay? So simple, right? So this is the entire thing that I want to tell you about the upcasting, and so that's it for today. And in the next tutorial, we're going to talk about downcasting in Java, okay? So the thing is, actually, if you talk about this kind of thing, using A, you can only call those method which is available in the A class, right? You can only call the A class method using this reference. So what about if you want to call the C class method? Okay, so how can we do it? We can do it by using downcasting, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next tutorial. And yes, if you're talking about the advantages of upcasting, what kind of advantages that we're getting if you're using this kind of code, we're going to talk about it in the next tutorial, that means in the third tutorial, okay? So don't forget to subscribe to my channel to get all these videos, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much guys for watching. Do subscribe, do share if you like this tutorial. If you watched the entire tutorial, if you're finding it good, then do share it with your friends, with a colleague, or whoever you want to say. Okay, so thank you very much guys for watching it. Hope you will have a wonderful day. Take care and happy coding.